Sergio Mendes, dead at 83, music legend who worked with Black Eyed Peas and helped create 007 themed dyes. The world famous Latin artist who created soundtracks for the James Bond franchise passed away in Los Angeles, TMZ reports. Mendes received an Oscar nomination for his song Real in Rio, which he made with John Legend for the 2012 animated movie Rio. He took home 3 Grammy Awards over his 70-year career. Mendes was known for playing samba-style bossa nova music often crossed with funk. He collaborated with dozens of other iconic artists, including jazz legends like Herb Alpert. Mendes also worked on the title song for James Bond film Never Say Never Again in the 1980s. Mendes re-recorded a version of his breakthrough hit track, Mas Que Nada, with the Black Eyed Peas in 2006. He was married to fellow performer Gracinha Leparache, and the pair had worked together for decades. Mendes got his start at nightclubs in Brazil, but had his biggest success with hit singles in the U.S. He was invited to perform at the famous Bossa Nova Festival in Carnegie Hall in 1962, joining João Gilberto, Antonio Carlos Jobim, Stan Getz, and Charlie Bird. There, he met several other legendary musicians and record producers, and 2 years later moved to California. He later performed the Oscar-nominated song The Look of Love at the Academy Awards in 1968. Some of his hit songs include The Fool on the Hill, Scarborough Fair, and Never Gonna Let You Go. Mendes was one of the most internationally successful Brazilian artists of all time. Over the course of his career, he recorded over 35 albums, with many going gold or platinum. Sergio Mendes is a Brazilian musician, composer, and producer, widely recognized for his contributions to the bossa nova, samba, and Brazilian jazz music movements. Here's an overview of his life and career. Mendes grew up during a time when samba and bossa nova were evolving. He studied classical piano at a conservatory, but jazz fascinated him, particularly the works of musicians like Stan Getz and Horace Silver. Mendes gained early fame by merging traditional Brazilian rhythms with jazz and pop. His group, Sergio Mendes and Brazil to 66, became famous internationally. Brazil 66 was signed by Herb Alpert's A&M Records and released hits like Mas Que Nada, 1966. Originally a Jorge Ben composition, became an iconic song blending samba with American pop and jazz. The Look of Love, their version of the Burt Bacharach and Hal David classic, became a major hit and earned them international recognition. Continued success in the 1970s and 1980s. Mendes released several successful albums and explored a variety of styles, including funk, disco, and soul, but always with a Brazilian essence. In the late 70s, he had another major hit with Never Gonna Let You Go in 1983, a soft rock pop ballad that charted well on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. Collaborations and film work. Mendes collaborated with artists from different genres, including Stevie Wonder, Paul Anka, and Will Dada Adiem. His music has appeared in films and TV shows, and he was particularly noted for his work on the soundtrack for the animated movie Rio, 2011, which helped introduce his sound to a new generation, 21st century revival. In 2006, Mendes collaborated with hip-hop artists such as the Black Eyed Peas for the album Timeless. The album featured a new version of Mas Que Nada with Will Dada Adiem, blending Brazilian music with contemporary hip-hop and pop. This album was a commercial success and introduced Mendes to a younger audience. Mendes continued touring globally and recording, staying relevant and showcasing Brazilian music's global appeal. Sergio Mendes is best known for blending Brazilian rhythms, especially samba and bossa nova, with American jazz, pop, and funk elements. His music bridges cultural divides and has brought Brazilian music to international audiences. He also popularized Brazilian music in the United States during the 1960s wave of bossa nova, alongside musicians like Antonio Carlos Jobim and João Gilberto. Mendes has been married to Gracinha Leparache, who is a singer and often performed with him, particularly with Brazil 66 and Brazil 77. Mendes is celebrated for his ability to innovate while remaining true to his Brazilian roots. He has received multiple Grammy Awards and nominations throughout his career, including for his albums and collaborations in both the jazz and pop categories. He is regarded as one of the most successful Brazilian musicians on the global stage, with a career spanning over 6 decades. When it comes to 20th century Brazilian music, Sergio Mendes belongs to a rarefied group of musicians who participated in its creation. I remember Antonio Carlos Jobim showing me the song Aguas de Marco, Waters of March, in the early 1970s. Mendes says, casually confirming his status as an OG, he said, "Check this out, I just wrote it." And I said, "Wow, yeah, it's magical." But then everything he wrote was brilliant. A few years later, when Mendes made his first recording of the song, on his album Vintage 1974, Jobim played guitar. A pianist, producer, songwriter, and bandleader, as well as a Grammy winner and an Oscar nominee. Mendes is arguably the best-known Brazilian musician of all time. He was a founding father of bossa nova, the Brazilian pop jazz movement that became a worldwide craze in the 1960s and has inspired countless musicians and songwriters ever since. He's also the greatest popularizer of the Brazilian sound in history, bringing added renown to Jobim and other revered songwriters such as João Donato, Edu Lobo, Dori Caymmi, Milton Nascimento, Jorge Benjor, Carlinhos Brown, and Guinga, to name just a few. His own songs include the much-covered classic So Many Stars. But although he was the auteur of best-selling groups called Brazil 66, Brazil 77, and Brazil 88, Mendes these days signifies a genre unto itself, an alchemical fusion of bossa, samba, and older indigenous styles of Brazil with American pop, jazz, R&B, and funk. Usually thought of as a master of rhythm, whose deep Brazilian and funk grooves are omnipresent throughout his dozens of albums, he nevertheless says, "I'm a melody guy." He has reinvented himself continually over the course of a 60-year career, during which he has played and partied with Jobim, Frank Sinatra, Stevie Wonder, Herb Alpert, Quincy Jones, and other pop music royalty. His 2006 collaboration with Will.i.am, the bossa/hip-hop/R&B album Timeless, included a revamped version of Benjor's Mas Que Nada, Mendes' first big record from 1966, which became a hit all over again. A recent album and a documentary about his life by director John Scheinfeld, Chasing Trained, Herb Alpert is Down, are both titled Sergio Mendes. In the Key of Joy, the film is due to be released later this year, approaching his 80th birthday on Feb. 11. Mendes looked back on his career with Tidal recently via Zoom from his home in Los Angeles. As he spoke, his wife, the singer Gracinha Leparache, who has sung on Mendes' records for more than 40 years, dropped in to say hello and occasionally Google facts for her husband. "All my life I've been coming to the U.S. and meeting people. The first time I came was in 1962 to play in the first Bossa Nova Festival at Carnegie Hall. Then I went to Berlin and met jazz saxophone titan Cannonball Adderley, and he invited me to make a record with him. Then meeting Nesui Erdogan at Atlantic, my dear friend, and making records for him. Then meeting A&M Records. Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, and traveling and doing shows with Sinatra and Fred Astaire. People I never in my life thought I'd be working with. All those encounters have been very serendipitous.